We came across this sweet little purse handle, and it was just the right size for an iPod or an iPhone, a couple of credit cards, a key or two, your driver's license, and a little bit of cash. Now, in some cases with bag handles, you'll find that the sewing holes are on the inside where you won't see them when the construction is done. This one actually has the sew holes on the outside. And while I initially looked at it and said, I don't know about that, it occurred to me that maybe we could incorporate some of the beads from the design into the actual construction. So we used it in our little purse. We're not going to talk about the stitching in this little video. You've already done that and you're an expert by now with all the bead embroidery pieces that you've done. And at this point your design area stitching is complete. So now we'll talk about putting the bag together. The bag is constructed of leather shapes with a faux suede lining, which keeps it nice and soft so your items won't be scratched when you put them in and out. We're going to use the actual beadwork as a template for cutting the leather backing and the interior lining. Cut along the edge of the printed area very close using very sharp scissors. You won't actually see the print area on this piece as I'm working because this is the original and it was stitched on a piece of non-woven with a sketch as opposed to a printed pattern which you will have had. You want to be very careful not to cut any of your stitching threads, so pay attention as you go around the corners. And make sure you don't cut away the unstitched area along the top round edge of the beadwork. This is the part that will actually be inserted into the frame. You won't see it when the bag is complete. Now that the beadwork is trimmed, we're going to use it to cut the other shapes. 2 pieces from the lining and 1 piece from the leather. We'll also cut a gusset, but we'll use a template for that shape. In any case, you want to lay the beadwork down on top of your lining. Use a pen or a dark pencil. Trace the outline just outside the beadwork area. And then when you're done, you're going to cut it out, again with very sharp scissors. You do want to make sure that you cut away any of the pen or pencil marks so that you won't see them later, but don't cut too deeply beyond these marks because you want to make sure that the lining is going to fit. So now you have 2 pieces of lining and 1 piece of leather, and all 3 are the same size as the stitched beadwork. Now cut the gusset using the template. You need to cut only 1 of this piece. Some beaders like to color the cut edge of their non-woven with a magic marker of a similar color. This is an optional step. The first thing we need to do in the assembly is to baste the pieces together where we can. We'll start by basting the beaded section to its lining. The stitches can be very large, and it doesn't matter if you can see them, because you're going to pull them out later on. You want to make sure that you baste right through all the layers, big stitches so you can get them, except up at the top where the stitches should be smaller because you can actually leave those in. Now with the leather you can really only baste it to the lining along the top edge where it's going to be inserted into the frame. You don't want to make visible holes in the leather. When it comes time to join the leather and lining to the gusset, we'll find other ways to secure it. Now we'll make the alignment marks that will make it possible for us to arrange all the pieces so they fit together properly. The easiest way to do this is to fold the pieces in half along their center line and make a mark on the inside where it won't be visible, using a pen or a dark pencil again. The alignment marks should be made at the bottom center of both the leather and the beadwork, and on both sides of the center of the gusset. The method we're going to use to secure all these pieces together is a standard bead edging, which is really a modification of the famous brick stitch. You're going to be sewing through 3 layers, so you do want to keep your glovers sharp. Remember this guy, that silly tomato that your mothers and grandmothers all had floating around when they sewed? Well, it's not silly anymore. When your glovers start to dull, and they will, you'll be able to sharpen them in the chili pepper section of the little tomato. Run the needle back and forth through the chili pepper, squeezing the sand as you do so, and it will sharpen it very nicely. It's marvelous. Make a sandwich with the leather side of the gusset outward, the lining of the beadwork inside, and the beadwork facing out on the other side. The wrong side of the lining and the threaded side of the beadwork should be facing each other. Secure a thread in the back of the nonwoven near the center mark and bring it out of the front of the beadwork. Make one looped stitch through all 3 layers. Now pick up an edging bead and make the same loop. When you tighten the thread, the bead will sit on the edge of all 3 layers. Run the thread through the bead again and tighten everything. Now the bead is going to sit upward with the hole facing away from the layered edges. We're going to work outward from the center in either direction, up to the end of the straight edge of the beaded area on the side of the front of the bag. Pick up another bead and run the needle through all 3 layers, making sure you're about 1 bead's width away, and far enough into the layers so you're sure you've caught all 3. Now run the needle through this second bead from the inside to the outside and tighten the thread, so this bead sits neatly on the layered edge. It will fall in place better than the first bead. And that's really all there is to the edging. You're going to just keep working bead after bead, being careful not to crowd the beads, adjusting the layers around the curved edges as you need to, until you reach the top of the straight section of the beaded area. This is just about where the hinge on the frame will land. You might find it easier to push the needle through 2 layers first, and then push it through the 3rd layer before you pull the needle all the way through. We had you cut the gusset a little bit long to allow for differences in stitch tension. So when you get to that top of the straight edge, you may find that you've got a little bit of extra gusset leather. Later on you can trim it straight across, but wait until you have the back leather stitched onto the gusset before you do this. Now layer the leather with its lining with the wrong sides together, match up the alignment marks to the gusset, and add the edging beads all around so that the leather is secured to the gusset in the same way that the beaded front is attached. You can see here that we've already trimmed off the gussets. Now it's time to actually slide the unbeaded basted section along the top edges into the openings of the bag frame. The beaded section will fit into the front, and the leather will fit into the back. If you notice a little bit of non-woven showing in the front, you can stitch in a couple of background color beads to fill in later. If the lining doesn't match up perfectly, you can trim it even, but try not to cut the basting stitches. When you sew the handle to the bag, you want to use a doubled thread for strength. You're going to start in the center and work outward in both directions, just as you did when you were adding the edging beads. You can use a knot to start. Secure your thread in an area where it won't be seen. Run up through the center hole in the bag handle and pick up a bead. Now run back through the same hole and back through the non-woven in the same general area as you brought the thread out initially. You'll notice that the needle has to be put in place at a very sharp angle. Tighten the thread to make sure that the bead sits flush against the bag handle, and then move on to the next hole. You'll notice again that you need to place the needle at a very sharp angle. You'll be poking around trying to find that little hole in the handle, and your glover's point may be dulled a little bit, so don't forget about that chili pepper sharpener. Work outward from the center in the same manner on both sides, and before you know it, your bag is ready to use. Enjoy! This is Ann Benson. Thanks for joining us.